Coups across history. Welcome to our channel Global History, where history isn't just about dates, it's about the people, power, and events that changed the world. From epic revolutions to secret coups, we uncover the stories behind the headlines and reveal how the past still shapes our lives today. Subscribe now and join us on a journey through time. With captivating visuals, expert insights, and real stories of ambition and intrigue, you'll see history like never before. Don't just learn history, experience it, question it, and discover the lessons that still matter. Part 1. Ancient to medieval coups. Power, ambition, fear. Throughout history, humanity has witnessed countless struggles over who should hold the reins of authority. Some battles are fought on the open field, some in crowded streets, but the deadliest often unfold in the shadows, behind closed doors, in palaces, or within the halls of government. These are the coups d'état, sudden, often violent seizures of power by those who were already inside the system. From the blood-stained corridors of ancient Rome to the Janissary revolts in the Ottoman Empire, and the palace intrigues of imperial China, coups have shaped the course of nations, kingdoms, and empires. They are both a symptom and a cause of political instability, a reflection of the eternal human struggle for control. Our story begins in 44 BCE, in Rome. Julius Caesar, a military genius and political leader, had consolidated power like no one before him. To many senators, he was a tyrant in the making. Fearing the end of the Roman Republic, a group of senators, led by Brutus and Cassius, orchestrated his assassination. Caesar's murder was more than an act of violence. It was a political coup, an elite-led seizure of authority intended to restore the Republic. But as history would show, it only plunged Rome into civil war, setting the stage for the rise of emperors and the end of the Republic. Fast forward to the 17th century Ottoman Empire. Power was concentrated in the Sultan, but the military elite, the Janissaries, wielded enormous influence. In 1622, Sultan Osman II sought to reform the army, threatening the privileges of the Janissaries. In response, they revolted, captured, and ultimately executed the young sultan. This was a classic palace coup, the military, already embedded within the state structure, asserting its authority to protect its interests. In empires like this, coups were often a tool for survival rather than ambition, a brutal balancing act between ruler and military elite. Meanwhile, in imperial China, coups were a recurring feature of dynastic politics. Generals, palace officials, and sometimes even eunuchs conspired to remove emperors. These coups, often violent, sometimes bloodless, shaped the rise and fall of dynasties. The stakes were enormous: control over vast populations, wealth, and legitimacy. In such a system, a failed coup could mean death for the conspirators. A successful one could secure a new emperor and reshape history. Even in these early eras, we see the patterns that would recur for millennia: concentrated power, elite factions, and the delicate balance between authority and ambition. Though separated by geography and culture, these early coups share key characteristics. They were elite-driven, often militarized, and aimed at either preserving a system or radically changing it. They were violent, but calculated, and they set the precedent for what would become one of the most enduring features of human politics: the sudden seizure of power from within. As centuries passed, coups did not disappear, they evolved. Monarchs and emperors faced not just the threat of military revolt but also colonial interference, ideological movements, and the rising influence of parliaments and bureaucracies. The next chapter in our story moves us from the ancient world to the early modern era, where power struggles became entwined with religion, commerce, and emerging nation-states. In Europe, coups took new forms. Kings were overthrown by nobles, generals, or even popular uprisings. In England, the Glorious Revolution of 1688 removed King James II and installed William of Orange, not through a bloody battlefield, but through political maneuvering and military threat. In other regions, such as France and the Italian city-states, coups often involved a mix of palace intrigue, assassination, and military pressure. Power was never secure, and ambitious individuals were constantly testing the boundaries of authority. In Asia, similar dynamics played out. In the Mughal Empire, princes frequently attempted coups against reigning emperors, leading to periods of civil war and political instability. These struggles were often intertwined with familial rivalries, administrative corruption, and regional power bases. Even the wealthiest and most powerful empires were not immune to the allure of sudden power grabs. Part 2. 20th Century Coups and Cold War Interventions. The 20th century brought unprecedented change. Empires fell, new nations emerged, and the modern state became a battlefield for ideology, wealth, and global influence. Coups, once limited to palace intrigue and elite revolts, now reached a global scale. Military takeovers, political assassinations, and external interventions reshaped nations from Latin America to Asia and Africa. Latin America became a crucible of political experimentation and turbulence. Democratically elected leaders often faced the wrath of entrenched elites, foreign interests, and military factions. In 1954, Guatemala experienced a dramatic coup engineered by the United States. President Jacobo Arbenz sought to implement land reforms that threatened U.S.-based corporations, particularly the United Fruit Company. In response, the CIA orchestrated a military coup, installing a government aligned with American interests. This event illustrated how external powers had begun shaping the course of domestic politics on an unprecedented scale. Kinzer, 2003. Nearly 2 decades later, in 1973, Chile witnessed one of the most notorious coups of the modern era. President Salvador Allende, the first Marxist elected democratically in Latin America, faced fierce opposition from the military and business elites. Backed covertly by the United States, General Augusto Pinochet led a violent coup, overthrowing Allende's government. The military regime that followed would rule for 17 years, employing brutal tactics against dissenters. Chile's coup became a symbol of Cold War geopolitics and the vulnerability of democratic institutions in politically polarized societies. Kornblue, 2003. Meanwhile, Africa experienced its own wave of coups following decolonization. Newly independent nations faced fragile institutions, ethnic divisions, and inexperienced governance. Nigeria's first military coup in 1966 revealed the country's deep regional and ethnic tensions. Over the next 3 decades, multiple coups and counter-coups would dominate Nigerian politics, undermining stability and civilian governance. Falola and Hedon, 2008. In Congo, independence from Belgium in 1960 sparked immediate turmoil. Prime Minister Patrice Lumumba faced political rivalry and assassination, culminating in a coup backed by foreign powers. These interventions reinforced the perception that Africa's nascent states were vulnerable not only to internal power struggles but also to the strategic interests of global powers. In South Asia, Pakistan's 1977 coup reflected another dimension of military intervention. General Zia-ul-Haq deposed Prime Minister Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, citing corruption and national instability. The coup entrenched military influence in Pakistani politics for decades, demonstrating how a single event could redefine governance, civil-military relations, and national ideology. Rizvi, 2000. In Bangladesh, the assassination of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman in 1975 marked a tragic turning point. The country, still recovering from its war of independence, faced a violent coup led by mid-ranking military officers. The subsequent years saw a series of counter-coups and eventually the rise of General Hussain Muhammad Ershad in 1982. For Bangladesh, coups became a recurring mechanism of political change, destabilizing democracy for years. Jahan, 2005. The Cold War added a new dimension to coups. Superpowers no longer relied solely on ideology. They used covert operations to install regimes sympathetic to their strategic interests. The United States supported coups in Iran, Guatemala, and Brazil to prevent communist influence. Wested, 2007. The Soviet Union backed socialist-oriented coups in Afghanistan and elsewhere. Grau, 2011. In these cases, coups were not merely domestic events. They were instruments of global strategy, altering the political landscape of entire regions and setting precedents for decades to come. Part 3. Post-Cold War coups and early 21st century interventions. With the Cold War's end in 1991, the global political landscape shifted dramatically. Many believed that the era of coups was ending. The collapse of the Soviet Union, the rise of international norms promoting democracy, and global economic integration seemed to reduce the appeal of military takeovers. Yet, the post-Cold War period proved that coups were not a relic of the past, they had only changed form. Thailand offers a clear example. In 2006, the military removed Prime Minister Thaksin Shinawatra, citing corruption and threats to national stability. A second coup followed in 2014, reinforcing the military's recurring role in Thai politics. Both events highlighted that, even in countries with established democratic institutions, internal political polarization and the perception of elite incompetence could justify military intervention in the eyes of the public. Chambers, 2013. In Central America, Honduras experienced a military coup in 2009. President Manuel Zelaya's plans for constitutional reform sparked a crisis that culminated in his removal by the military. This event demonstrated that coups in the post-Cold War era often involved a complex mix of constitutional disputes, public unrest, and elite power struggles. Rull, 2010. In the Middle East, Egypt's 2013 coup illustrated how popular mobilization could intertwine with military action. President Mohamed Morsi, the country's first democratically elected leader, faced massive protests and a polarized society. The military, led by General Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, intervened, citing national security and public demand. Cook, 2012. In Africa, the post-Cold War era saw a mixed picture. International norms and pressure from organizations such as the African Union reduced the frequency of overt coups, but political instability persisted. Countries like Guinea and Côte d'Ivoire experienced crises that threatened to escalate into military interventions. Part 4. Patterns, Causes, and Consequences of Coups. From ancient Rome to modern Africa, coups have shared recurring patterns. Across time and geography, certain conditions make countries vulnerable, certain actors predictable, and certain consequences inevitable. First, the actors. Coups are rarely random. They are usually carried out by individuals or groups with access to coercive power, most often the military. Sometimes it's a faction of elites within a political system. Other times, external powers manipulate internal actors to achieve strategic objectives. Second, the context. Weak institutions, fragile democracies, economic hardship, ethnic or regional divisions, all create fertile ground for coups. When citizens lose confidence in governance, when corruption is rampant, or when political leaders appear incapable of maintaining order, the military often positions itself as a corrective force. Third, external influence. During the Cold War, coups were often instruments of global strategy. Today, external influence is subtler: diplomatic pressure, economic sanctions, or support for specific political factions, but it remains a factor in shaping outcomes. Analyzing coups across history, several recurring patterns emerge: military dominance, elite dissatisfaction, public perception of legitimacy, fragile institutions, and external interference. The consequences are profound: political instability, democratic erosion, human rights abuses, economic disruption, and international isolation. Part 5. The Modern Era, Reflections and Conclusion. As we enter the 21st century, coups have re-emerged with renewed vigor. Fragile institutions, political instability, and societal frustration with governance continue to create opportunities for abrupt seizures of power. Mali, Myanmar, Niger, Burkina Faso, and Gabon illustrate that military takeovers remain a potent force. Across history, coups are most likely where political institutions are weak, military forces remain autonomous, and citizens perceive civilian governments as ineffective. The scale, technology, and international context may change, but the underlying dynamics remain remarkably consistent. History also provides lessons. Strong institutions, civilian control of the military, rule of law, and active civil society reduce coup risk. International norms can influence outcomes. Vigilance, transparency, and accountable governance remain humanity's best defense. The story of coups is a story of ambition, fear, and the struggle to define authority. From Rome to modern capitals, power is contested, fragile, and fleeting. Understanding this history is not just academic, it is essential for nations seeking stability, democracy, and justice. The struggle for power continues, but so does the human effort to balance authority, legitimacy, and freedom. Coups are more than just power grabs. They're a window into human ambition, fear, and the fragile nature of political systems. From ancient Rome to today's world, they show us how easily order can collapse and how crucial strong institutions are for stability. But there's hope. By learning from history, strengthening governance, and holding leaders accountable, societies can prevent chaos and protect democracy. If we pay attention to the lessons of the past, we can shape a future where power serves the people, not just those who seize it.